Hello and welcome to this edition of Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. I am Phillip Muliisa. On this episode, we go to Parliament and we want to look at one of the debates that are going on in the Parliament of the Republic of Uganda that has the rationalization of the Uganda Coffee Development Authority. Government says they want to pull it back into the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries, and there is a lot of contention on that matter from members of the opposition, some members of government, cultural institutions, religious institutions, the general citizenry, and we want to look at why this is coming out that way. Why are people so much opposed to this? Why is government insistent on having this rationalization of this agency done? And indeed, we have a wider rationalization campaign by government. We want to see, is it a good one? Is government doing it the right way? How is the process? And indeed, is it the right timing for such endeavors by the government of the Republic of Uganda? Now, joining me on that conversation, and indeed many more other conversations relating to that, is a panel of distinguished citizens of this country whom I will introduce. Starting from the extreme end, I have Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa. He's a professor of political history and indeed a political analyst. Professor, greetings and you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you, and to the listeners, I greet you, and I'm happy to be here to share with you issues of national importance and the national integration.
Thank you so much, Professor Ndebesa, for joining us, and indeed we can't wait to hear from what you have to share with us today. Next to Professor is Timothy Chemonges from CEPA and the Parliament Watch. Timothy, greetings and you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Good morning to our viewers. Glad to be here. Looking forward to a fruitful discussion.
Thank you so much. And on my immediate left is a lawyer. He's a partner at Eliakim and Edson Advocates. And most importantly, in 2026, he's looking at shaking the tables somewhere in Ntungamo there. The people of
Not
Kajara.
banging.
Whether he bangs or shakes, I don't know, he will tell us. But I have Counsel Eliakim Atumanya Kapson. Kapson, greetings, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much, and dear viewers and listeners, my name is Eliakim Atumanya Kapson. I'm glad to be here to share my views and opinion about the coffee debate.
Thank you so much. We can't, I don't know what you will be doing. Had you been in Parliament today, I don't know what your position would have been, but you will tell us a little bit about that. I want to start with you, Timothy, before I go to the professor. You have a lot of time around Parliament, studying the environment and looking at how things are run in that house. Government is trying to, like they say, reduce expenditure. They tell us they want to streamline services. They are looking at accountability. Why do we have a lot of contention, especially around UCDA at the Parliament of Uganda?
Thank you. It's true that the ongoing discussion really around UCDA and its rationalization is part of the bigger discussion of ensuring that we rationalize but also see how we can minimize the cost of operation by government. And so the particular interest that we have, or the country has specifically on the UCDA, is on its role and the consequence that is likely to arise as a result of its rationalization. But also it speaks to the general trust and belief of the people on the ministries, and that's just not limited to Ministry of Agriculture, but broadly speaking for the government and what it has to take for such a critical product or institution to be handed over to a mother ministry. As you may be aware, every country has specific issues, so there are specific products or items that are so dear to the livelihoods of the people or to the growth of the economy, and most of these require a bit of a critical way of handling them, or even how we look at it as a country. And this again is subjective, but every country has their own way of looking at it. For Uganda, leaving coffee alone, the oil is one of the oil, for example, is one of those products that we are looking at as a country to give us a bit of a step towards economic growth, but also for the country speaking. And so the discussions around having oil, for example, to be at the hands or the whims of Ministry of Energy, or providing or allowing such a product to be within a specialized agency or institution to manage it, I think that majority of us will be inclined to the view that because of the critical nature of oil, for example, you need a more specialized, you need more experienced, but also you need an institution that has a bit of focus on this specific issue. And the same concept really applies to coffee. Coffee ceases to be just a regional, a local discussion. Coffee, in terms of its contribution to the growth of this country, is something that can't be emphasized more. The questions to do with its impact on the livelihoods of the people directly, it's something that also cannot be emphasized further. And so what that means is that discussions around those issues are dear to the lives of the Ugandans, because any attempts to risk with that, you are directly interfering with how people live, the quality of people's lives, but also the hope that people have in this country. And so the discussions around UCDA goes just beyond the revenue that UCDA contributes. It goes to the extent of the ecosystem or the structure that feeds each other. It's true, for example, the colleagues have actually argued that UCDA, for example, contributed up to around a mere 82.2 trillion in the last financial year. Billion. And the argument seems to be that is so small of a contribution to warrant the sort of discussions or the sort of energy we are putting in this sort of discussion. But that is missing the point, really. If the focus is only on the money, you miss the point. It's on the likely impact of such a product being handed over to ministry. But also, just maybe, I know you will be going further to the next colleagues, is to look at it from the ministry's perspective. Again, Ministry of Agriculture is the focal institution in this case on matters agriculture, husbandry, and all the other products. And we've seen how ministry has handled other products or crops, such as vanilla, such as tea, and most of them are really struggling. They are struggling, and we've not been able to optimize the best from these products, notwithstanding that they are under the ministry. And so again, the trust of having to put such a critical product to the ministry is something that is a bit worrying. And lastly, really, for me again, is to understand what mischief are we trying to address, especially with the question of rationalization. We agreed that it's agreed that the concept around rationalization is important, because again, as a country, what we need to do is to a bit minimize our cost of production, meaning including the resources that goes towards salaries, remuneration, and all that can be reduced, so that we have a bigger chunk of resources going towards development, especially understanding that as a country, we are in our debt status is not very interesting. And so the concern around having UCDA in terms of its contribution to the economy, it's something that's also key. It's not that it's essentially withdrawing a lot of money from the consolidated fund, and the mechanism of its financing can be discussed. The thing is, and I absolutely agree with colleagues that are actually pushing that we strengthen UCDA and even include other products such as cocoa under this specific, under this specific agency, as opposed to removing and putting them all under the ministry.
Thank you so much, Timothy, for that detailed analysis of the situation at Parliament. Professor, you see, you keep telling us of, there's an example you normally use when the Director General of World Trade Organization visited this country, and you keep saying Ugandans did not even know he was coming. Now, picking from what is on ground, and indeed when you listen from Timothy here, he calls this critical, something so dear, something that needs specialized attention. And indeed, Ugandans across, when you pass by the border stages, you go to the cultural institutions, the churches, people are discussing coffee and the coffee bill. What is so unique about this coffee and the coffee bill that everyone is choosing to pay attention to what is happening around it?
Well, thank you, but before we come to that, let me give the history of this whole issue of creating agencies. There is a trust deficit in the government departments, and it is not that government agencies cannot work and actually cause economic transformation and development, but it is because of their weaknesses that has caused this uproar. Now, what happened to such agencies before? Because I think when we got independence, or around that independence, very many of those kind of parastatals were created. Parallel agencies which are not the mainstream ministry. It is like decentralizing, but at a parallel level, not vertically, but horizontally. And when NRM came into power, or when the IMF and World Bank came with the structural adjustment programs and the privatization and liberalization and reorganization, actually that creation of those agencies was also called rationalization. So we are like coming from rationalization to rationalization. Now, before we look at this current rationalization, we may have to look at the problems of the other, why the other rationalization the first time, that is in 1990s. One is that government ministries were seen by World Bank, IMF, and other development partners and the government as being too bureaucratic. They had a lot of bureaucracy and red tape. And to sidestep that red tape, you create that horizontal agency that will not be encumbered by the red tape in the ministry. That's why they were created. One of the reasons why they were created. Two, it was to attract specialized, technical, highly educated and technical people with skills. Because if you left it in the ministry, it would be very hard to give somebody such a high salary and leave out others. So when you create the agency, then you justify why you are paying that person more money. And facilitation also, the development partners or donors would facilitate a few people rather than the whole ministry, which was heavy. So that is why they had to create those agencies. But also that sector that took up such an agency was said to be central. Since it is central like coffee, it, as my colleague here pointed out, it is linked to very many livelihoods of the people directly. The peasant farmers, because coffee in Uganda is mainly by peasant farmers. So that's why they created, among other reasons, why they created those parastatals. But also, I think the development partners who were advising governments had in mind the state interference, government interference with parastatals, with those agencies that were doing very well even during the colonial period. During the independence period, they started performing poorly because there was government interference, which is partly true. Like if you consider such a parastatals in 1960s, the first Obote One government, they were nearly all UPCianized. What do I mean by that? That you'd have coffee marketing board, then you start putting there UPC functionaries. Rather than considering competence, and meritocracy, you consider loyalty to your PC. And when you put such a person, you cannot even hold him accountable. Because if you are to dismiss him, you lose political support base where he comes from. The cooperatives also were undermined because of that. Because they were fused with the government, and therefore the leaders of those cooperatives ended up having political supporters of the regime in power. And that is how those agencies were undermined. So it was felt that if you leave them in the ministry, the minister who is heading them is a political animal. And he would put somebody in that agency as a finance officer or the manager, whatever, somebody to support him so that you can use him as a leverage to campaign for you. So the creation of those agencies was kind of to shield them, to cushion them against political interference, which to some extent actually worked. I know somebody who was in such an agency, and the agency was given vehicles, and he wanted to give vehicles and give them to others. The person refused, and actually the minister reported him to the Public Service Commission, and that person stood on his ground and said, I would rather resign than you taking away these vehicles from us, because I know you want to give them to your girlfriend. And when he insisted, he resigned, but that person, but he had also connections. Even the minister was later dropped. Anyway, I don't want to mention the names. So those were some of the reasons why. My question now is, have those reasons gone away? Why they were created? Has bureaucracy and red tape gone away? Is political interference going away? Aren't they going to be enormized? I mean, the civil servants now who are merged to a politician who would want to put his people so that he can, accordingly, because those agencies, it was not easy sometimes to interfere with them, because sometimes if they had a project supported by these external forces, they would cushion the people, and they would even participate in interviews to make sure that only qualified meritocracy people went there. So the red tape, isn't it there? Isn't there going to be political interference again as it was? Will it attract the most skilled people if you are going to put them at the salary of all public servants, because we cannot afford to pay that much that they have been giving? Will the development partners not fear to give money to the ministry in general, that to be spread thinly to all the civil servants there? I think we failed to look at that background. Finally, now coming to your question, why Coffee Development Authority and not other authorities? One, we have already talked about it, that it is linked. It appeals to many people, because coffee is grown by very many people and they derive their livelihoods from coffee. So anybody who was opposed to actually the whole rationalization, but had no entry point, now it is politicking now. You know, when you talk about coffee, you'll get citizen support. When you talk about others, you won't get citizen support. Now they have got citizen support. It is very emotive. It is appealing. It has become cultural. It has gone to the region, because coffee is grown by very many people, and therefore there is a lot of connection between coffee, Coffee Development Authority, and the politics. So a politician who didn't want rationalization, or who wanted to capitalize on it for public support, political support, he now uses the question of Uganda Coffee Development Authority. Otherwise, I also personally have a problem with this logic that, for example, coffee now contributes 1 trillion shillings in earnings. In research, we avoid that. Do not connect necessarily the two. There are other intervening variables that were responsible for this coffee production. Not only coffee development. Supposing Coffee Development Authority was not there, wouldn't coffee be doing very well also? Wasn't coffee doing very well in 1950 and 60? Was there Uganda Coffee Development Authority or a similar authority to develop it? But ultimately, I think that coffee may need such an authority which is not only promotional in the sense of promoting the growing of coffee, but is also regulatory. I think that's what those who want it to be merged are not seeing. Regulatory function. It is looking at coffee quality. It is also looking at marketing. And 3, it is also involved in research. I think people haven't looked at that agency and its role in research, which is very critical. So will the ministry carry out research as Uganda Coffee Development Authority has been doing? I have doubts, because there are other agencies like Kawanda Research Station, those research institutes. They have got a certain degree of autonomy, and that's why they are doing what they are doing. So Coffee Development Authority, once you merge it, you will not attract the best researchers in this country, because they are not going to go to the ministry. And the ministry is not the best supervisor of a highly technical activity like research. So that's why I think Coffee Development Authority can remain. But lastly, from a broader perspective, why did we even embark on this new rationalization? If it is to reduce public spending, what about others? I mean, why haven't we rationalized the whole appointment of RDCs?
Professor, this is the first step government is taking.
Why are you starting with these parastatals which are even performing, and you can see that they are doing something? Why not presidential advisors? Why not members of parliament? Why not cabinet? Why not these other agencies of government that are increasing? Why not stopping the creation of new districts and new cities? That we have created new cities and we are creating more cities. I don't know. Let me ask whether when these new cities were created, there have been better services when those areas were municipalities. Why do we start with these agencies? I don't know whether, but most importantly, UPCianizing agencies in the 1960s undermined their performance. What about the fear of NRMizing these agencies again and weaken them and make them not perform?
Thank you so much, Professor, for that UPCianizing and NRMizing. But I think maybe for the position of why starting with UCDA, the advisors you want to start with are the people giving the advice on where to start. So maybe that's the reason, but we check on that a little later. Eliakim, you have contested for Member of Parliament before. Assuming you are in the Parliament today, what would be your position and what are your reasons?
And why?
And why? Yeah, thank you so much, moderator. I think my take legally, when you look at the National Coffee Act, it is well structured, and because it provides for the functions of the UCDA and the board and the composition. Now, my position would be let UCDA be. Why? Because we have not received any complaint from the general public, from the exporters about UCDA and how it's functioning. And 2, where they're taking the functions. They're taking the functions of the Ministry of Agriculture. And everyone, or most people, have reservations with the Ministry of Agriculture on the issues or departments and other cash crops that they have handled before, they're still handling. So you find people, farmers, in farmers' perspective, are worried about the future of coffee. So we've seen everyone is excited about coffee. People are planting coffee day and night. The market has increased. The price is high. So, and now they're saying they put it back into the Ministry of Agriculture. And those are uncertainties. That's what people are worried about. So, if I'm a member of parliament, I would listen from my people. What are they talking about? What is good for the people? I can have my opinion as an individual. Then I consult. What are the people's concerns? But if you to look at it as where we stand now, everyone is against dissolution of Uganda UCDA and transferring its functions to the Ministry of Agriculture. Everyone has his own reasons, because now when you go to Ministry of Agriculture, the bureaucracy that Professor talked about, here in coffee we are dealing with exporters, people who are into business. Basically it's business. So they come, they want to renew their license, they want to check on their products or commodities, whatever they are going to do. So now we are dealing with the government officials who have their way of doing things. And now here we have an exporter. He has no time to waste, to wait. He wants the license to be renewed in time. Maybe someone has acquired loan, the interest is running. Then you go into bureaucracy, you go to office, they tell you, our minister is not here, we have to wait for permanent secretary, the board has to sit, they're in, maybe someone is on leave, he will not be able to perform. So, and those are the things that we have been seeing in most of the ministries. So now getting coffee and putting it under the ministry, and also make it a department at that, that means you're reducing it to that. But now when you look at the UCDA Act, I mean the National Coffee Act, UCDA is a corporate body. It can sue or be sued. So it's independent in nature, how it is structured under the National Coffee Act of 2024. I mean 2021, the National Coffee Act 2021. UCDA is a corporate body. It can sue or be sued. It has a composition of board members. So that means someone can come direct to UCDA. If he has any grievance, he can go direct to UCDA without going through the bureaucracy of, if you want to see the permanent secretary, if you want to see the head of department, the head of department will not make a final decision. He has to consult the minister. The minister will go there and say, I have to consult the Attorney General, because now if it's under the ministry, even the Attorney General has to give an opinion on something. If they're going to take a decision, they have to go through all those channels, and that's what people are worried about. How are you saying that you're streamlining? It is streamlined already, because if you're saying it has its functions, the mandate is there for UCDA, it is well streamlined, and the act is recent. It is for 2021, because now that act, the National Coffee Act, it repealed and replaced the UCDA Act, which was there before, streamlining the functions under UCDA. Now when you're saying that now you're dissolving UCDA and you're transferring the functions to the Ministry of Agriculture, that's not streamlining. The streamlining was done when they enacted the National Coffee Act, giving it the mandate and the composition. Now when you have to look at even the composition of the board they have a representative from Minister of Finance, there's a representative from Trade, Minister of Trade, there's a representative from NALO, that is National Agricultural Research.
Yes.
There's a representative from Ministry of Agriculture, there's a representative from exporters. Even exporters have a representative on the board, where even the farmers, the processors, so you see everyone's interest is catered under the board. So that means when they're discussing, they look into their issues. Even when they have an issue, there is a provision that talks about arbitration. Like if you have a grievance with the farmer, exporter, and the processor with the UCDA, amongst themselves, like the actors have grievances, they engage the arbitrator. The UCDA will arbitrate. That's the provision. Like UCDA will arbitrate if there's any grievance between the actors. So that means if you have an issue with an exporter, a processor, middleman, you engage UCDA, then they will mediate, they will arbitrate. Then you have an issue with the UCDA, will also go through the arbitration. So now when you put it under the ministry, that means most of the things will be missing. And as a farmer who wants to be in charge of the coffee I'm growing, and so that means if you are to go through the ministry, it's going to be a long process. Now, when you look at the extension workers from the ministries, at the district, at the local level, if you ask if you make just a random call and you call someone from the village, when did you last see an extension farm or an agriculture officer coming to your garden or find you where and advise you? It's rare. It's rare. But now the UCDA, actually people were giving their concerns, say no, these people came and started training us, and now when you're saying that you're taking them to ministry, that means you're taking away our coffee. That's what people are thinking, you're taking away our coffee. Now also the control, because under the functions of the UCDA is giving out the permit, the licenses. So that means if it's under the Ministry of Agriculture, there is a possibility of creating a monopoly, which most people may shy away to talk about, but the professor highlighted a few things here and there, whereby when you put it there, there is a possibility they can lock out some people to get. But now if it's an independent
for
body,
political reasons.
Yeah, for political reasons, if you're not aligning to a particular establishment, that means they can cut you off. But if it's an independent body, as you've seen, fine, even by the way, even when it's UCDA, the influence can be there, but it's minimal. The influence is there, but it's minimal because you have seen it's a corporate body, it's supposed to be independent. But if it's under the ministry, there's going to be a lot of interference. So I would support whoever is supporting the coffee to remain independent, the coffee management and whatever functions you want to do with coffee, just remain independent. And Timothy mentioned something interesting when he talked about you just leave it as a body. Now me, I was thinking, actually, even the cash crops, if they can create a body for all cash crops, say we have cash crop development authority or something like that, so that all the cash crops, especially the leading export commodities, be under one body and they can be managed within that body. That one can also work. Also, if they have a problem with expenses, then you restructure the body. You restructure it to maybe to reduce on the expenses and all that. Then also lastly, if you're looking at cutting costs because you're rationalizing, because you want, the intention is to reduce the expenses. We have corruption that is rampant in this country. If president can focus on corruption and say everyone who is corrupt or anything that is linked to corruption is going...
The president is focused there.
Yeah, but now if he can put much emphasis on corruption, because he has done it, and when he starts doing it, he will basically do it. So even now, if he put more emphasis on corruption, because you see, most money that our country is losing is through corruption, these corruption tendencies. And we're not going to run away from corruption when we put this...
Maybe the president has the wrong formula and perhaps he needs advice from people like you to tackle that particular problem. But as you conclude.
Yes, so as I conclude, I will encourage members of parliament, consult the people you're representing. Because when you're in parliament, you're representing Ugandans, you're representing citizens. What are they saying? If they're telling you, no, we don't want this coffee to be taken to the Ministry of Agriculture, just tell it straight to the president. The people you represent, they are against this. Even when you go to parliament and you're going to vote, just stand for that. Other than because the president has said, this is what I'm interested in, because you're NRM and say that, no, I'm going to go with the president. That's not right. We should not, the members of parliament should not mislead the president. They should actually tell him that from the communities we represent, people are saying UCDA should remain with its function, and actually it should be strengthened so that we can...
Thank you so much, Council, for that, and I hope they can listen to that with your reasons. Tim, you see, one of the things you keep talking about, and indeed Council here and Professor, is they are worried the ministry will not handle the matters of coffee and indeed how UCDA is handling them, extension services, things to do. Professor mentioned bureaucracy, political interference, and so on. Government is saying over time they have developed capacity to make sure they undertake all these activities and make sure they are done on time and make sure they take on the technical people Professor mentioned, they absorb them in the ministry and so on. If government is promising this, what is the worry?
The worry remains that the promises that Ministry of Agriculture is issuing is not a matter of it's a practical thing. And you can make a physical assessment in light of where the ministry stand. And Professor highlights, very critical reasons as to why these agencies were addressed. He highlights the question of political interference. Has that been addressed? Do you think that you're better off having UCDA as an autonomous institution, ability to make its independent decision, that even when there's a bit of interference, they enjoy a bit of an autonomous state, and so they're able to make decisions. You can trust that their decision-making capacity or structure is a bit sober. And so the question of political interference, as Prof highlights, is still something that is still hovering around. Two, again, ministry may have established capacity, but the bureaucracy that Eliakim highlights, the reporting structure, who do you even bring to some of these challenges to, the issues to do with the Attorney General, and broadly speaking, the ability of the manner in which ministries operate as opposed to having agencies operate, it is likely to frustrate. It's likely to frustrate the whole process. The other really is to say that sometimes trust is earned, not given, and that Ugandans, though there could be, even though their decisions or their perspective on trust on some of these ministries is concerned, may be a bit skewed. There's a general reason for why there seems to be a unanimous voice by Ugandans, both the elite group and the farmers down there, raising concern on why we should not. I think probably the question to dissect further is to understand what is the interest of government in pushing this, despite the push by Ugandans, or the concerns that we continue to raise. Government seems to be very particular and they are very interested. Could it be that they are really interested in managing the cost, or there could be a bigger reason? I think that from where I stand is that government interest in coffee and the resources that come in there is extremely high, and they would also want to limit the bureaucracy, either to access these resources or that to influence or even have a stake in how some of these. It's easy for government to actually have a direct hand in how either resources, the operations, and some how these whole dilemma, or how all this business is being handled in the ministry as opposed to the agencies. And so ultimately the concern is that there has to be an open discussion. I've seen the president has taken time to write a lot of pieces addressing it to the country, the Bazukulu, and the rest of the people, and is laboring really to pass a point which seems most people seems not to be getting, and I think for the first time he has written so many pieces on a specific point, but ultimately I think he has to listen really. The hope is that the caucus which is sitting today, the hope is that our representative can speak truth.
Who's the representative?
The people's representative.
I am going to tell you whom they represent.
You finish. The interest.
You finish.
Since Prof has highlighted that and he wants to, we do trust that those that we elect hold the interest of the people. But again, it's true that he who pays the piper calls the tunes sometimes. And so ultimately, and you see what's happening in Parliament, where the Speaker is more invested than the members of Parliament themselves. And the members themselves seem not to understand exactly what's happening. And in this case, they appear to be more of an agent of the executive on this specific matter, as opposed to the representatives of the people.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Timothy. And I know Professor wants to tell us who the MPs represent, but shortly after this break. Thank you for keeping it focused on Parliament on Civic Space TV. We head into a very short break and we shall be right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that very short break. It is Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. I am Phillip Muliisa. Today we are discussing the Coffee, Uganda Coffee Development Authority, Parliament, Executive, and the people. Who is right, who is wrong, who wins at the end of the day, and helping me on that conversation is Professor Mwambutsya, Ndebesa, Timothy Chemonges, and Atumanya Eliakim. Professor, getting into the break, you wanted to talk to us about who the members of Parliament are representing, but as you tell us who they represent, we want to imagine government engages in research before coming out with positions. I want to imagine they have very good researchers and their position insistent on making sure this agency is put out of action, and in the act it is very clear, abolish Uganda Coffee Development Authority. What is that underlying point in taking out this? But also when you listen to the president over time, when he was, during his acceptance speech 2021, he was telling us how the global coffee value is about $450 billion and Uganda is only getting $800 million, and he was uncomfortable with that. A few months later, we see him coming up with Pineti and trying to establish a monopoly in there that was opposed, and he gave up. Now we know there is a very huge factory in Ntungamo, Inspire Coffee Limited. And what is the reason the president is so insistent on this?
Thank you for that. I don't know. We got the information from President Museveni that this rationalization is based on Salim Saleh's report. I think I saw it.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the right.
So I expect that Salim Saleh consulted the researchers and technical people to come up with this report. I don't remember that the ministry or government or cabinet commissioned a white paper, which is normally done when there is a policy shift, say in the ministry or any other department. This was not the regular way of doing it, that it came from public service and there was a white paper. So there was a report, and according to the president, it was Salim Saleh's report. And he must have consulted the technocrats. But also what we don't know were the terms of reference of those people who wrote the report. My suspicion is that there was one factor that you go and find out the expenditure of these agencies. And if it looks too much, we dissolve them. And it was in general terms, I think. It was not particular to certain agencies. It was generalized to all those horizontal decentralization agencies. If it was very clear about the terms of reference, in order to cure, these lawyers tell us curing what? A mischief? If there was a mischief to cure, One of them would be that red tape and bureaucracy, but also flexibility. I can give you examples. These authorities can at any one time employ anybody, provided he's technical, he's competent. Once you go back to the ministry, you use the standing orders of Public Service Commission. You cease to be to have that flexibility. For example, in the ministry, I think technically speaking, you don't employ anybody above the age of 60. So you can imagine how many people are between the ages of 60 and 70 with competence, with skills, with knowledge of coffee, who would utilize in coffee development. Once you go to the ministry, those ones will not be employed. I don't know whether we are very competent here about conversant about what goes on there, but I think there is a tax on coffee exports. Is it called CEPA or something like that? Yeah. Which goes to Coffee Development Authority. The moment you merge it in the ministry, that tax money is likely to be shared.
Actually, you see, for CEPA, which actually as it stands now, it's at 2%. It does not go to the authority. Actually, no, when the authority decided to increase that from 1% to 2%, Ministry of Finance got it, and so it goes to the consolidated fund.
No, even if it goes to the consolidated fund, the ministry can ask for it because they know how much went there. Like universities now, university students now pay the consolidated fund, but the university follows up that money. Say, we have these students, they paid this much, give us this much. Somehow, although it may not come. So, but now the moment you merge it, and it becomes part of the ministry, it is not very easy to get that money. And even when you get it, you are not going to give it to only people in agriculture. You are going to spread it to other officers in the Ministry of Agriculture. There are very many. There is fisheries, there is forestry, there is entomology, there is research, there is, name it. So that one is, to me, a challenge, which they should have looked at when they were writing that the Sarim Sare report. Because we don't know who commissioned the report, what were the terms of reference, or it was just an initiative of Sarim Sare and friends or technocrats. I'm not privy to that. I don't know how it was carried out. Now, concerning the MPs, there is this talk about MPs not only for coffee, development, authority, whatever. They are representative of the people. Who told you? Let's not just go by mere technicalities that they are representatives of the people. Like we say, members of parliament make laws. Do members of parliament make laws? Or they just review the bills coming from the executive? Because the executive is the one which initiates almost 90% of the bills, if not more than 90%. They come to parliament, and parliament scrutinizes them, but they don't originate them. You get me? And if the executive, even in the current regime under President Museveni, doesn't even want to listen to the views of the members of parliament, they call a parliamentary caucus and do the needful. But finally, one of the biggest lawmaker in parliament is the president. Do people know that? I think some people don't know. The president assents. Finally, you debate, but he has to assent. And he can refuse to assent. And quite often when he has refused, parliament has gone his way, which means he's a central focal point in law making. But they say, hey, parliament makes laws. Which laws now? Don't you see the executive is the one which makes laws? So, at times, members of parliament are representatives of the executive or president to the people, not the other way around. Because that's why when they are going to stand, like my friend here is going to stand, you have to go, especially when you are in NRM, you have to go and seek the blessings from the president. Okay. But even when you are NUP, you have to seek the blessings from Chagulanyi. In other words, if you rely only on the people and you think the people will elect you, first of all, you will lose out in primaries. And when you lose out in primaries, definitely, unless you come as an independent, a leaning one at that also. So the dynamics are not so straightforward as they are laid out in law and in theory, that MPs are representatives of the people. Quite often they are representatives of the president to the people. I'm not saying it is only Museveni, even during UPC. Members of parliament were representatives of Obote to the people, not the other way around. And so we have to be careful about such laws. I think there is a need to have to rethink and reflect, and I think sit back and have intellectual input into this exercise. My intellectual input that I would recommend is, let's rethink this whole notion of rationalization, which is the second rationalization, because there was a first rationalization. Why was there the first rationalization? What did it intend to chew? We are not saying that these agencies are not weak or they are not draining much from government, but it's not a matter of looking at the cost alone. Look at democracy, elections. Elections are very expensive. Why haven't we rationalized elections and said, let's have no elections for the next 20 years? Because we spend a lot on elections. Don't we spend a lot on elections?
Professor, that would be troublesome.
It is going to be troublesome also. You can see how this coffee thing has generated a debate and a narrative and the public atmosphere that is dividing this country. Because the most important thing, in my opinion, about post-colonial states is building a state and a nation. Without a state and a nation, we shall remain like the Caribbean countries. We shall not be like, as the president says, like the Asian tigers. We have to build a state. Performance of these organizations was correctly observed by Professor Adebayo when we were launching the first year development plan. You know, we had stopped having the year development plans from Obote time and had gone to these papers. What did they call it? They used to call them some poverty eradication papers or something like that. And then we went back to development plan. So when they were launching it, I was present. And they talked about how it is going to work, what. So Adedeje was the guest of honor, or the guest speaker, because the guest of honor was the president. He said, unless you stop patronage, the fine letters and articles you have written in this national development plan are not going to be implementable. You have to address the question of patronage. So whether you merge or leave Coffee Development Authority autonomous, you have to cushion it from political patronage, especially in respect of appointment now. When you take it back to the ministry, and then Public Service Commission, and then every time you have to advertise. After advertising, you find people passing the interview before they have done the interview. They first ask you your name. You can pass or fail because of your name. Your religion, you can pass or fail because of your religion. You can pass or fail because of the school you attended, and things like that. Now, what Coffee Development Authority and other authorities have been doing, they have been headhunting. They would say, so and so, you are in America, or you have been working in the World Bank. Can you come over? Say, I can come over, why not? Oh, but look here, I am 62 years. I say, we don't mind here. You can come as long as maybe you are not yet 70. And bring you today, in the ministry, the way I know how ministries operate under a public service order, you are not supposed to be employed there when you are above 60. And we are going to miss out on the skills of those people. You know, we are going to miss out on the skills, competences of competent people who actually, if they go to private sector, they will do very well. I have seen people who come from the government sector and go to the private sector. You find the headmaster retiring at 60, is taken over by a private school, and does wonders. Within those years, he is still at least active up to the age of 70 or 75. which flexibility has been allowing these authorities to recruit. But once it goes back to the ministry, Mr. Gobi, the permanent secretary, will say, we have put a freeze on recruitment by public service, and it is hereby implemented. You will not have employment in the Ministry of Agriculture for coffee, because the freeze of the permanent secretary cuts across. Whereas in agencies, they had a leeway. They could recruit, isn't it? These agencies, apart from Coffee Development Authority, have been recruiting in spite of the ban of Ministry of Public Service. Now the ban of the Ministry of Public Service and the Ministry of Finance will work throughout, and we shall miss on that flexibility. So people should go back to the drawing board and have intellectual input into this Salim Saleh's report without necessarily dismissing it, because it must have pointed out some of the loopholes and some of the challenges, some of the mischiefs, but I think it was not exhaustive enough, it was not participatory, it did not involve the general public, and yet, let me tell the public here, there is something that we have been flouting, which was mooted by the government, and this government at that. Any policy shift, any policy, before it becomes policy, it is supposed to have input from the general public and other stakeholders. I don't know how much of this Salim Saleh's report had engagement and input from various stakeholders. If it did, how come that they are up in arms against it? I suspect it didn't have that one. And that was flouting the public service procedures. And very many Ugandans even don't know those procedures because they have not been popularized by government. How many people know that policies, the holding house of policies is Cabinet Secretariat? It is Cabinet Secretariat that is in charge of those policy making processes. And the Cabinet Secretariat came up with guidelines. It has got guidelines as to how policies should be made, policies of government should be made. So those guidelines actually constitute themselves into law. But can we go back and find out whether the Salim Saleh report followed the guidelines of the Cabinet Secretariat in policy making? Because this is a big policy shift of government, the second rationalization.
Well, thank you, Professor, for that rather detailed and clear submission. Council, you see, the President has come out to say that you proponents of the independence you are preaching of the agencies and many other government institutions are, one, parasites, and two, agents of imperialism. And you want these foreign countries to keep getting a lot of money. He talks about how 1 kilogram of coffee costs about $2 in Uganda, and when it's taken to Germany, it's about $40 or $50. And he says you people are very bad to this country. He has a case against you, not so?
Thank you very much, moderator. One, let me first comment about the issue of a member of parliament not being the representative of the people, of the president.
Practically.
Now, practically, okay, what is supposed to be is a member of parliament supposed to represent the people who voted for you. So now, that's what we need. That narrative should change. That the members of parliament or MP will be in line with maybe the president, the party president. That narrative should change, and I think we should educate Ugandans and voters that if you have voted for someone, he's representing you, the voter, not the party president. So that narrative, I think you have a big role to play, the civic space, to educate Ugandans to understand. If I wake up in the morning and I go and cast my vote, I've voted for a member of parliament to represent my issues, not the issues of the party president. That one should come out clearly. Now, on the issue of the parasites, now, if you have to look at this bill and the debate, that means all Ugandans, or the majority Ugandans, are supporting the parasites, the imperials, the palliative. But now it's not about the parasites and how the agencies are working, but you're looking at the agents that you're trying to dissolve. Have people benefited from it? Is it functioning in any way? Because there are some agencies that you can rationalize and you dissolve and no one will even make noise. And even people will clap hands. But why are people up in arms saying that no, don't dissolve UCDA? That means people have benefited out of it. So that means not even the workers. I'm not an employee of UCDA. Neither anyone here is an employee. Members of parliament are not employees of UCDA. But they are standing up. If you to go to farmers and exporters, they are not that they are employees of UCDA, and that's why they are saying don't. That's why it's not that. That's why they are against the solution of UCDA. It's because they have seen the achievements and also looking at the future of coffee. Where is it going? And that's what the president should understand, or should. Why are people supporting what he calls the parasites and the agencies that are not functioning and all that? Why are people in for it? And if he can make, and he's good at intelligence and getting information, if he can deploy his technocrats to go and get that information, why are people more interested in this coffee? Have they been influenced by the imperialists or what? Then he will understand, he will appreciate why people are choosing to support UCDA. Now, the last time when the president talked about or supported the Anti-Homosexual Act, I went to different radio stations and everyone was praising him. Everyone was saying that, yes, this is our man, this is our president, because most Ugandans, maybe most people supported that. Now, when it comes to coffee and you see people are saying, no, we don't want to touch our coffee. Because when you're talking to farmers, for them, they don't even know. The moment they hear that you're taking their coffee to the ministry, they know that's disaster because of their interaction with, I think, the ministries and knowing the bureaucrats and all that. So it's not that the fears of the president are within cutting costs and expenditure. You should also understand that when you're going to be fighting to reduce the expenditure, but in the long run, you find even the cash crop, the leading export commodity that everyone has picked interest in, it's going to die, it's going to vanish. And it can happen. We are not prophets of doom, but you're saying it can happen. There's a possibility of that happening. Then, of course, now knowing that the president is, when he wants something, most likely it will happen. It's also to call upon the entire public and religious leaders to raise their voices and raise their concerns, and also tell their member of parliament to take their views to the president, to understand their concerns, other than keeping quiet, and at the end of the day, the president will make a decision, or the members of parliament will be silenced in one or the other, and they just keep quiet, and the UCDA will be dissolved, and the functions transferred to the ministry, which is likely to be a disaster to the coffee industry.
Thank you so much. Timothy, we are talking about lawmaking. And one of the principles, and indeed one of the qualities of very good law, is that it should represent the aspirations of the people. The people are saying something. When you look at this panel, when you go to some of the churches, when you listen to the cultural leaders and indeed the people behind them, they are saying, please, this is not what we want. This is not what we aspire to. The lawmakers, and Professor just told us the president is one of the principal lawmakers in the country, are saying otherwise. Is there a possibility of this law being challenged? Should Parliament go ahead and pass it? Can it be challenged and it is repealed later? Or what should the citizens do to make sure it is not passed?
Thank you, Philip. Really, maybe I am particularly interested in a bit commenting on what Prof highlights in terms of the roles of members of parliament and what that looks like, but also responding to the question, what next? I should emphasize that the individuals who are charged with ensuring that we make laws, but also, govern the country, they are politicians. And politics is not a one-way, really. There are quite a number of other dynamics that contributes to how their decisions are directed, but also how the process looks like. Amidst the roles that the Constitution mandates the Parliament to execute, it's true there are a bit of challenges here and there, like the issues to do with legislation, for example. And Prof is right, indeed. The President is just one of those, is a critical stopgap within the policy lawmaking process. But also, more importantly, is to emphasize that it is true that it is the role of Parliament to make laws. And what does making
to scrutinize?
Making laws, by the Prof, maybe we want to look at it also from slightly a different angle, where indeed others come from Parliament, others come from the executive, but we have also within our laws where members of Parliament are allowed to, initiate private members' bills.
But that's about 10%.
Absolutely, and it should not. The truth is this: actually, the opening or the allowing for members of Parliament to initiate laws was a cure of the frustration that the executive or government was failing to do certain things. And so there needed to be a window for which Parliament itself can, or members themselves, can actually initiate laws where they think government is not maybe paying attention further, or even maybe the focus at that specific time in a specific point in time, there is an interest. In our jurisdiction, of course, it could be a law from the executive, which is government, or it could be from a private member bringing the law. In other jurisdictions, we have other forms, like where a committee, say you have a committee on health, whether it's whatever committee in Parliament.
But you see, Timothy, most importantly, again, even with the private members' bill, there must be acceptance by government, and if government is not supporting your bill, then they will deny you a certificate of financial implications.
Things like
the
that.
Attorney General will not assent, and things of the sort.
True. I mean, that's true. And again, you see, where we stand today, the leeway of private members to actually bring laws has increased. Why? Previously, it used to be that you must have a certificate of financial implication accompanying the bill. Recently, there was a bit of change on the Public Finance Act, and actually it indicates that where Ministry of Finance does not respond within 60 days on the request for the certificate of financial implication, it shall be deemed that this certificate was granted. And again, it is a cure for the previous challenge that the House or the members were facing. You submit your request, and the House or the Ministry of Finance does not respond or even does not act on it. And so it ends up frustrating. And so for me, again, is to say that even when members of Parliament should strictly, or the public or the people that we are addressing should familiarize and understand what these members of Parliament are supposed to do. Because even when the executive or the establishment wants to push certain things to go their way, the number of times that happens, it's always very few times. The rest, in a year of 365 days, you'll find that it's maybe less than 10 times that the government wants to indeed push a specific thing, through members of Parliament. But on the other days, it is within the discretion of Parliament to make to determine how they want things to go. Matters have been raised on the floor of Parliament as matters of national importance. The Prime Minister has been tasked to respond to specific issues, but there are quite a number of other dynamics indeed that affect. In fact, I've recently written a paper around the ability or how Parliament actually does not have power in terms of budgeting. Because you see, the budget arises from the executive.
I would like to read that.
The budget arises from the executive. And if you look at the Public Finance Act, it actually limits the percentage of how Parliament can alter, adjust that specific, and it's around 12%, that Parliament shall consider the budget and may not alter it substantially to a tune of 12%, meaning you're only left with around 12%. And what that looks like is just largely reallocation. I say, yeah, you've put a lot of it, let's get from this sector. Two, looking at the ability of even Parliament itself to have influence on what resources, where resources should go. You've recently seen the president bringing back. He actually refused to sign the appropriation bill, which is the law that goes along with the budget, and he refused and brought it back to Parliament, raising concern that Parliament had
shifted monies from particular dockets to others he was not comfortable with.
I mean, he was not comfortable, but if Parliament thought that they were right, they should have stood by their foot. But even when, for example, I give you a responsibility, if you fail to execute it, it doesn't cease to be your responsibility. I should hold you responsible, and we should hold you by your tie when that fails. So I guess there are a number of challenges, and we can continue discussing on how do we strengthen the roles of these members of Parliament. But ultimately, they are responsible, and they are the people. The number of times we even engage with the presidents are very few times, apart from him sending letters and on social media. There are many times that these members of Parliament, those that we elect, we must continue pushing, demanding for better, and ensure that they do what they are supposed to do. Ultimately, maybe the last, in light of the question which you asked, is that, so what next in light of, what next if Parliament indeed goes ahead to pass this specific law? Within our legal framework, any person can actually choose to challenge a specific law where there was an anomaly. And courts, again, the judiciary is the other arm of government that provides a bit of checks and balances for the other arms of government. And so I've seen a bit of arguments in light of the gazettement, a number of issues that could have arisen from the process of this specific law, and that also could be a window. But ultimately, I think that we still have a window as of now to engage the respective agencies, to continue engaging the president, our members of Parliament, to listen and to take into consideration our views.
Thank you. Professor, should this law pass, what challenges, what risks are we looking at emerging, especially in the coffee sector, but also we have very many other crops that we go with farmers have in this country. We used to talk about cotton, we used to talk about cocoa, tea, and many other crops. Where are they?
Thank you. I think when we are debating some of these issues, we need to go beyond the technical aspects of it and go to the politics of it. And UCDA, by the way, or UCDA, may not necessarily be the panacea to the challenges of coffee production and productivity. After all, as you pointed out, there is a whole Cotton Development Authority. I think it is being dissolved now, merged, but it has been there, and cotton production has been declining. Why hasn't Coffee Development Authority done as the Coffee Development Authority is doing? That's why I don't want to link the two, that it is necessarily because of the authority, because there is the Cotton Development Authority headed by, I think that lady has headed it since time immemorial. Sabuni, somebody like that. So, how should this law go? You see, it has gone away from the technical economic logic domain to the political domain. You see, since those who have been pushing for retention of Coffee Development Authority are the opposition, President Museveni wouldn't like to be seen to be defeated by the opposition. It has now gone to the political domain. So he will have to insist. Even if he doesn't, he has bought the idea, he will insist. You remember when he insisted, when Chiza Besigye in the reform agenda brought the issue of removing the head tax, this graduated tax, NRM completely trashed it because they didn't want to be seen to be defeated by Besigye. As soon as the elections were over, NRM abolished the graduated tax. That means they were looking at it from the lens of politics. So where we have gone now, it is a political lens. Museveni has dug in. He does not want to be seen to be defeated by opposition. You can see even the speaker making that statement to the effect, you should not allow this Baganda have the numbers.
Yes.
Now that is going too far. And therefore, when you say what will be the effect of this this UCDA debate, actually it is polarizing the country and is hardening the boundaries of ethnicity. It has gone into ethnicity now, away from economic logic. So now you hear the Cathedral of Buganda is digging in. Yeah? I have heard also the Anglican Church is trying to dig in. Any other group might come to dig in. And they are widening the issue. You know, you watch the debate now and see. It has now gone beyond coffee. It has gone to the other areas. So my worry as somebody who wants nation building and nation integration, I am worried about the trend, the direction the debate is going. It is no longer a coffee logic, an economic logic. It is now who wins what, who does not win what. And even those who support the bill now, they are not necessarily using the lens of economy or finance or coffee. No, they have also now dug in. They want to use it as a political tool, instrument for scoring political political gains. Unfortunately, it has taken on an ethnic lens. And the speaker's comment made it worse. So once we emphasize that debate, we are eroding all gains towards national cohesion. Now, if the way I look at it now, the lens I'm using now as myself is what trend. You know, they say there is an English word, is it a proverb, opening a Pandora's box. A Pandora was supposed to be a box keeping some dirty things or insects. Once you open it, now this Coffee Development Authority has opened the Pandora's box. Don't think that the debate, the major debate you see there is purely economic. It has now become political. And let nobody tell you that there is one side politicizing, another one is not. All have now decided to politicize. They are looking at it to score certain goals. And it will depend upon the skills used. But not only the skills, the way you look at it. Personally, I look at it in terms of polarization. This country is polarized. We lack that national cohesion. And we are beginning to have caucuses that are regional. You see, I saw the Buganda caucus. The other day, I saw Western caucus. I didn't see an agricultural caucus. Why don't we have a cross-party and cross-national caucus like agricultural caucus? Because agriculture is throughout the country. Or coffee caucus. But we are beginning to have ethnic caucuses. So the bill is now hardening the ethnic boundaries. And you Ugandans, if you don't know, sometimes you dismiss us. Yeah, those academicians, they are just talking. When you have this coffee bill hardening ethnic boundaries, you are undermining national cohesion and national unity. And the president definitely will not allow to be defeated. He has never done that. That is an Museveni. Once he digs in, politically, he has to first win this battle and get that image that he is a winner. Then after that, he can even decide actually to bring back the Uganda Coffee Development Authority. But for now, he has dug in. And any member of parliament of NRM who risks to say that he represents the people and doesn't support it in the coming elections, in primaries, he will be undermined. You will be decampaigned. Wow. And the members of parliament are rational people. They know where the bread is better buttered. They know how they survive. They have got a very high sense of survival. That sense of survival is going to determine how they are going to vote, not the economic logic. So where we have reached now is very dangerous in terms of national cohesion. And so I think this political class should be very careful. If I was to advise them that please, where we are moving, where we are walking is a tight rope, they say, the proverb, and we can easily slide into a cliff. From this Coffee Development Authority, you know, when there is a problem, when there is an underlying problem, underlying source of a problem that is hidden, when it is coming up, it doesn't come up exactly as directly that thing you are looking at it. This Uganda Coffee Development Authority is now a different thing. It is now a national question, a political question that has nothing. Where we have reached, originally it had economic overtones. Where we have reached is now a political support question. How can I use the Coffee Development Authority bill to defeat my opponents, whichever side that there is? And therefore, we should even be careful about language. I think in Uganda, we are not very careful about language. We should pass a law to criminalize what one could term, they call it speech what? This negative speech. There is the hate speech. We are going to have hate speech in this coffee. It has already happened. We have seen the hate speech. It is going to continue. And that hate speech is strengthening ethnic boundaries. I hope it won't go to religious, but it is now basically ethnic and regional boundaries. So I don't know anybody with, it's not only skills, in my opinion, it is also somebody who is a statesman and stateswoman to see far. Like the speaker, that statement she made. It can boomerang. It can cause trouble in this country permanently, by the way, on her and on the whole country. Oh. So let's be statesmen. Let's be wise. It is unwise to continue digging in on this thing, one way or the other. I don't know why they shouldn't postpone the debate of Coffee Development Authority, whether it is this side or this side. They say, we shall look at it. You know, President Museveni sometimes uses that method. We shall address it. Let us discuss it in December. When December comes, you don't even discuss it, and it will end up there. You have not admitted that you have been defeated. That is my advice to him, because he wouldn't want to be defeated. But at the same time, you have not insisted that it be dissolved. You just postpone it. We shall look at it in the next April. When April comes, you forget. We shall be in elections and the thing will go away.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that
and the thing will go away.
Advice to the President and indeed the members of Parliament and the public. We need to be careful. We need to avoid hate speech, and we need to look at how we build national cohesion. Gentlemen, our time is very much fast spent. We have about 5 minutes to be out of here, and we should use that to give our way forward, final remarks on this particular topic of the coffee and the rationalization agenda of the government of the Republic of Uganda. I'll start with you, Eliakim.
Thank you so much. I think my parting shots, one, we should listen and we should advise our leaders to listen to the people who voted for them, and also members of parliament to speak the truth. You tell the President of Uganda, you tell him the truth, the concerns of the people. Then if you want to cut costs on expenditure, there are things that you can touch, and you tackle the issue of the expenses. So let's handle this coffee issue diligently, without emotions, not politicizing it. And also, it's not a tribal issue. It's a national issue. Coffee is a national treasure, so everyone is concerned. From whichever region you come from, let's contribute, let's stand firm, let's educate people, and also encourage people to plant more coffee, and let's stand with all the leaders to make sure that they enact laws that will help Ugandans to grow and stand firm for better of our country. And also not to be selfish and you just think about yourself. Because I want a vote, then I will go with whoever is going to endorse me. No, let's hear the concerns of the people and we stand with the people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Council Eliakim. I hope that
Eliakim
is
Atumanya.
Eliakim.
Yeah.
Sorry. I hope that is a political view of choose the people, not who is giving the support, and I hope it helps you in the forthcoming election. Timothy.
Thank you so much, and again, thanks to the panelists and to our viewers for sparing time to listen to us. Really, you know, it's not easy to spare almost half an hour to listen to views. It's a bit tricky, so to thank them. Mine is to specifically Parliament. This is the 11th Parliament since we got the independence, and that we've had parliaments that have been characterized as very strong, parliaments that stood for the people, and parliaments that understood what their cause was. Among those really was the 6th Parliament, which was headed by Right Honorable Kabulu. And you know, their history or the landmark that they left was very critical, partly because they were able to understand what it meant to hold the responsibility. And the mandate that they had, the responsibilities that the 11th Parliament and those that are coming will not change in substance. It is on how you choose to execute that. It is in how the members of Parliament appreciate how to execute the mandate, but also understand the landscape of the political landscape in the country. Of course, that also goes into understanding taking into consideration the interest of the people. And so, beyond the politics, beyond the interests that individuals may have, we have a country to serve, we have people to protect, we have country to serve, and that we must prioritize and know what is important. You have the mandate to legislate, to see how budgets in the country are shared, see how the views of the people find themselves in the decision making, and ultimately seeing how laws are made. This is an opportunity for you to contribute to your role, and I call on you to do that what you are charged with.
Thank you so much, Timothy. And lastly, Professor.
Thank you. I think my concluding remarks would be that this bill, the Uganda Coffee Development Authority bill, where it has reached, it has gone beyond the economic domain and is basically the political domain. And it is likely to have a negative impact on the cohesiveness of the country. And therefore, it needs to be tackled sensitively. And if I were the people who tabled the bill, this rationalization, the others can continue, but if this one has become so sensitive, you don't necessarily drop it, but you withdraw it temporarily. Say, let's first understand it and say we shall bring it back. In the meantime, you preempt these other sectarian sentiments. Otherwise, if you pass it as it is now, since you have labeled it a Baganda bill, because that's what the speaker said, it will look as if you have defeated Baganda or Buganda, which does not augur well with national integration. So, I suggest that it be withdrawn, not dropped, because if you drop it, it would also appear that the government, NRM, has been defeated, which doesn't want that image to go with it. But withdrawn to be brought at a later date, which later date may not even come, and we shall have Uganda Coffee Development Authority waiting for it to be tabled again until further notice.
Thank you so much, Professor Mwambutsya and Ndebesa, for those views and for making time to join us today. Timothy Chemonges, thank you so much for the views and for making time to join us today. And Council Eliakim, Atumanya, Kapson, thank you so much for your views and for making time to join the conversation today. And indeed to our viewers, thank you so much for keeping it focused on Parliament on Civic Space TV. Special thanks to the team behind the machines, and special thanks to the Center for Constitutional Governance for always making sure this is done and is possible. From us, we say good evening, and may you have freedom always.